Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. Thank you very much to the speaker and participant who joining this webinar from across the world. My name is Widi Mugijani, fellow at the DFD-led CSIS Indonesia, and I'm pleased to welcome you to Critical Mineral Strategic Future, US and Indonesian Approaches, co-organized by the DFD Lab, CSIS Indonesia, and the Institute for the Study of Diplomacy, Georgetown University. Tonight, we are delighted to have participants turning in this evening from Indonesia, this morning from Washington, D.C. as well. Whether maybe you can just started your day and also ending it here in Jakarta. And thank you very much once again for joining us. Before I started, I want to read some of housekeeping matter first. So just a few quick notes for everyone joining us online. This session is being recorded and may be shared afterwards. Please keep your microphone muted unless invited to speak. If you have questions at any time, type them into the Q&A or chat box. Our team will collect them for the discussion segment. If you experience technical issues, please message our event support in the chat. Camera are welcome, but completely optional. This webinar have like 3 sessions for 60 minutes. So we will start with the opening remarks from each of our 4 speakers, about 5 minutes each, and then we will move into a moderated discussion and finish with audience Q&A before we close. So without further ado, maybe we enter to the first session. As we know together that critical minerals are fast becoming the new gold or new oil of our time. For Indonesia, strategic investment in this sector is not only a key driver of development, but also a pillar of its industry policy and a central lever of strengthening its position in the global trade. For the US itself, they are vital to economy, competitiveness, and national security, with efforts underway to expand domestic production, streamline permitting, mobilize resources under Defense Production Act, and advance offshore exploration. Both nations, Indonesia and US, aim to carefully diversify supply chain without full decoupling, creating strong opportunities for cooperation in diplomacy, investment, as well as technology. So tonight we are very fortunate to have with us 4 speakers. The first one is Professor Kelly McFarland, the Director of Program and Research at the Institute for the Study of Diplomacy, Georgetown University. Good morning, Professor McFarland. And then, yes, hello.
Thanks. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And then the second speaker is Dr. Edi Prio Pambudi, the Deputy Minister for the Coordination of Economic Cooperation and Investment at the Coordinating Ministry for Economic Affairs at the Republic of Indonesia. Hello, Pak Edi.
Good evening.
Good evening, Pak. And then the third speaker is Reggie Singh, Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary for Energy and Critical Minerals in the Bureau of Economic, Energy and Business Affairs at the U.S. Department of State. Hello, Reggie.
Hello, thank you, Bu Widi, and selamat malam to my friends in Indonesia.
Thank you. And the last not the least, Rafitrandi, researcher at the Economic Department of CSIS Indonesia.
Hi everyone, great to be here.
Okay, thank you, Dandi. Okay, to begin our conversation, so recently the Institute for the Study of Diplomacy, Georgetown University, has developed a working group report entitled Mission Critical, Securing America's Critical Mineral. So I would like to invite Professor Kerry McFarland to deliver opening remark, as well as to share the brief of the report. So, Professor Kelly McFarland, the screen is yours.
All right, thank you. And as she mentioned, good morning to some of you and good evening to others. I'm excited to open today's discussion and share an overview on critical minerals. As she mentioned, it's a topic that's not just technical, but is really foundational to our global economic and strategic future. And I'm also going to share some of the insights from the recent report that Wadi mentioned on the subject that we published this spring at the Institute for the Study of Diplomacy. And I'd also love to thank CSIS Indonesia for partnering with us on this event, and I'm looking forward to the discussion that comes out of this. And with that in mind, I'm going to begin today with a little bit of a background on the report and the discussions that it stemmed from. So every year at ISD, we hold a series of working group meetings on what we like to call the new global commons. And then we write a report on the issue and provide recommendations for the United States and other interested parties. These meetings are funded through the Carnegie Corporation of New York's Bridging the Gap initiative. And we at ISD would love to thank Carnegie for their support in these meetings. And, as we already discussed, critical minerals are ever more present in our daily news cycles, let alone our daily lives. But still, the majority of people around the world don't really understand this issue. And that's one of the things we're trying to do with these reports is not only to bring academics and practitioners together, but provide an understanding of these issues to a broader public as well. And I think to kick off our discussion today, I'm just going to point out some of the main background issues that our report highlighted in order to set the stage, so to speak, for the discussion today. And the first thing is, why are critical minerals important? And we need to start there to understand what makes them so pivotal. And first thing is that these are essential to modern technologies. They're integral to the technologies that define our age and are really go hand in hand with what we do every day, whether or not it's electric vehicle batteries, renewable energy systems, semiconductors that are in everything that we touch and use these days, smart grids. And when we get into geopolitical competition and things like that, they're critical to a lot of defense systems as well. And as we move forward with economic and energy security, these are really the cornerstone of a nation's ability to grow their economies, and access to these critical minerals for these purposes are more and more important for economic growth and defense capabilities. But at the same time, these are so important because there is vulnerability through concentration, which means that many times these minerals are often derived from a small number of producing countries. And that means that global supply chains can be quickly disrupted through trade tensions, geopolitical conflicts, export restrictions, as we've seen recently, natural disasters, and as we know, epidemics as well. And I think in many ways, the supply chain disruptions from COVID-19 underscored this issue across a whole swath of industries and goods, including critical minerals. And I think we've seen a real uptick, at least in the US sphere, of viewing the importance of these supply chains post COVID-19. So why is the production increasing? Well, I mentioned all the things that these go into, and a lot of this is coming out of the clean energy transition. So the shift to renewables and electrification is driving an unprecedented rise in demand. For instance, lithium is expected to multiply many times over. The demand for that is expected to multiply many times over by 2040. And that's just one of the critical minerals and the numbers on many of these are the same. And it's because, technology is proliferating. It's in more and more things. More and more people are getting access to it. Electric grids are expanding, and you need critical minerals for all of these. And it's also because of the geopolitical supply risk, we're also seeing an increase in production as well as nations like the United States try to ensure a stable access to these. So I've mentioned the geopolitical issue that's inherent in this. So what is the global landscape? And Wadi mentioned this in her initial comments, but in a number of ways, today's scramble for access to both raw and refined materials resembles efforts in the 20th century to secure stable access to oil. Successive administrations in the United States have made secure access to critical minerals a priority for all the reasons that we've already noted. But the current balance is heavily weighted in China's favor. And China has dominance throughout the value chain on a number of these. It leads in mining and refining of many critical minerals, and it controls about 30 of the 50 minerals deemed critical by the US government. It also has the lead in refining of these minerals, including and especially rare earth elements, where it refines up to 90% of some of these. And it's also in recent years imposed some targeted export restrictions on certain things. So that's something that the United States and other countries are watching. On the United States side, we have an extremely high import reliance at the moment. In 2024, the US was fully reliant on imports for 12 critical minerals and more than 50% reliant on another 28. We do have some domestic capability in the United States, and as I'm sure we'll discuss, the United States has been trying to grow that capability and grow its capabilities and stable access through partnerships, which I know we'll discuss. But it does produce some of the critical minerals, but it's has a lot of room for growth. And we mentioned permitting issues already, regulatory hurdles and things like that, and investment. But we're moving forward on those things. There have been new investments and initiatives in the United States domestically, but also with a number of partner countries. And as we open up this discussion and the other speakers move forward, I think it's also important to note the importance and growing importance of Indonesia in this space. And the International Energy Agency's 2024 report was recently released, and it noted that since 2020, 90% of the increase in refined nickel production has come from Indonesia. So it's a large producer of these on its own right, in its own right, and a lot of room for partnerships and growth in these areas. And so I just wanted to set the stage, talk about the need for critical minerals, the importance of those, and where we kind of stand as far as who produces these things and where the access lies. So I'm going to stop there and turn it over to others, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Professor McFarland, very valuable insight. And also we note that very interesting in your report about the integration to the technology like economy and energy security, supply chain. I think all of the issue is very relevant currently. But let's move to the next speaker because we have limited time. So I would like to invite Dr. Edi Prio Pambudi, Deputy Minister for Coordination of Economic Cooperation and Investment at the Coordinating Ministry for Economic Affairs of Republic of Indonesia, to share the Indonesia perspective on the role of critical mineral in advancing nation development and strengthening its position in the global supply chain. Pak Edi Pambudi, the screen is yours.
Thank you, moderators, Mbak Widi. And I just would like to acknowledge Professor Kelly McFarland and Pak Reggie Singh in the United States. I believe that you just had breakfast, and I and Mas Dendi and in Jakarta, I also just had a dinner. So it's different time, but it's beautiful. So I would like to express my gratitude to the CSIS for inviting me to participate in this important discussion. So it is a privilege to share the stage with such distinguished panelists. We have Professor Kelly McFarland, is a very amazing insight. And then also Reggie Singh from the US State Department Bureau of Energy Resources and Mas Dendi. So discussion on critical minerals are increasingly important as the countries are moving fast to secure their access and also to some extent dominance in critical mineral sectors. So in the midst of that, Indonesia has emerged as one of the key players due to the abundance in natural resources. Therefore, Indonesia needs to develop strategic approach to the development of critical minerals such as nickel, copper, and cobalt. These minerals are the key for the renewable energy technology. And as the name is critical, so that's why I think this is not the end of the product, but the critical technology needed. So this is the defining our approach in energy consumption and securing energy security, as Professor Kelly mentioned. As we transition toward more sustainable energy alternative, the demand for these materials continues to rise. Securing critical mineral is vital, and Indonesia's abundant resources offer the unique chance for global leaderships. To capitalize on this, we need a comprehensive strategy focus on both extraction and processing. We understand now many regions, not only many countries, also prepare the partnership and the critical mineral. Sometimes they also on the state of the raw critical minerals, but I think it's also more important to give the added value for the critical mineral as a countries with the endowment by moving into the downstreaming policy. So by enhancing our refining and processing capabilities, we can integrate more significantly into the global supply chains, thereby extracting greater value from our resources. This initiative aligns with our overarching objective of fostering economic development to generate employment opportunity and facilitate technology transfer. As you know, sometimes when we try to get the some of critical minerals, the percentage of the critical minerals sometimes is very small. So that's why we need to have an extractive technology, how to optimize the percentage of the used critical minerals on the land. So a key part of our strategy is to build strong international partnership to support downstreaming efforts, integrate Indonesia into the global supply chains, enable technology transfer, and better prepare our workforce for a changing global market. So to realize this vision, we must prioritize skill development through collaboration between governments, industries, and education sectors, ensuring training aligned with emerging technologies and market needs. A stronger focus on innovation will further elevate Indonesia's workforce. Alongside skill development, we must prioritize sustainable practices and technology across mineral supply chains to minimize environmental impact, meet global demand, and ensure long-term resource viability and international credibility. So, dear colleagues, today's discussion is a chance to look beyond resources and focus on cooperation, and critical minerals can drive innovation and secure global supply chains and critical mineral. So with the US, Indonesia already have experience since 1967 when the Freeport McMorans and the first also have businesses in Indonesia, especially for the copper. So I look forward to the panel discussion with other panelists to dive deeper into these issues and explore potential collaboration between Indonesia and US in the critical mineral. Thank you, and back to you, Mbak Widi.
Thank you very much, Pak Edi, for sharing Indonesia strategies. So basically, we want to have like more beneficial in terms of employment opportunity, technological transfer as well, and the last is like sustainable practices. We noted that. But before we move on to the next speaker, I would like to remind again to the participants who want to, if you have any question or maybe some wanted to share your insight, please you can type in the chat box, or if you join in from the YouTube, so maybe you can also put your question in the comments. Okay, and then we back again to the next speaker. I would like to invite Reggie Singh, Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary for Energy and Critical Minerals in the Bureau of Economic, Energy and Business Affairs at the U.S. Department of State. Maybe he can share about how the U.S. is shaping its critical mineral policy to enhance resilience and foster cooperation with key partners like Indonesia. Reggie, the screen is yours.
Terima kasih, Bu Widi. And so it's a pleasure to be speaking this evening in Indonesia. And, you know, I'm just going to add a bit from the US perspective to the great sort of scene setting that Professor McFarland did about critical minerals generally and their importance. And then to add to Deputy Minister Edi's description of Indonesia's approach to critical minerals and where it sees value. So Professor McFarland mentioned the pandemic and its impact on supply chains. I think we saw there the impact on just-in-time supply chains. A lot of U.S. companies in particular had over the years developed very efficient, low-cost supply chains that delivered products to consumers at the lowest possible cost. And they did that through these often concentrated supply chains that were just in time. The pandemic showed that there is a cost to that, and the cost is if the supply chain is not resilient, some black swan event can really snarl things and cause a number of issues. So since then, I think we've come to the realization we need to build resilience into supply chains, and particularly in critical minerals. As Professor McFarland indicated, a lot of these minerals, a few dozen, have become highly important to modern technologies, to energy systems. They're important, for example, in a lot of high-tech equipment. And so the United States, over the past several years, has sought to diversify its supply chains. We've come to the realization that we are highly dependent on one actor. And from the U.S. perspective, I mean, we don't shy away from calling that actor out. In our view, China's dominance of critical mineral supply chains poses issues for us. It exposes our companies and our country and our allies to economic coercion. It also undermines our companies who are seeking to build the upstream and midstream spaces in the critical minerals area, both in the mining sector and then the processing sector. What we've found is that most of our companies, well, all U.S. companies in this area are private sector. We don't have any state-owned enterprises, and a number of our allied partners have the same situation, and they have to earn a return on investment. And when they're investing in a huge mining project or a processing project that takes many years and many hundreds of millions of dollars, in some cases billions of dollars, China, with its state-subsidized approach, its ability to support its companies in ways that we haven't to date been able to do, has been able to undermine the investment case. And so you see China controlling a lot of the upstream and particularly the midstream. One common statistic you'll have heard maybe in the past several months is China controls 90% of rare earths processing. The cliche is rare earths are not actually rare, but because of the way the industry is structured and the way those elements are processed, China over many years very strategically has been able to build a processing capability and is able to undercut on price a lot of U.S. and allied supply chains. And so we're in the U.S. working in the Trump administration, but also on a bipartisan basis with the support of our Congress to start diversifying these supply chains. So the Trump administration issued a number of executive orders over the past several months, including a couple I'll mention. Unleashing American Energy. It refers to energy, but there's also critical minerals built into that executive order. And then there's another executive order I'll highlight that establishes the National Energy Dominance Council. The NEDC, again, despite the energy in the name, also covers critical minerals and coordinates our efforts to diversify these supply chains. So how are we going about diversifying the supply chains? We have to support our companies who face this challenge, this investment challenge I mentioned of low prices and investing for the future. Just to cite one mineral, lithium, those lithium prices have been at multi-year lows in recent months, which has dissuaded a lot of our companies from investing in this space. But we know, if you talk to experts, that we will be short lithium. There'll be a significant shortage of lithium, in the next 5-10 years. So how do we encourage our companies to invest in this space while prices are at all-time lows and they have to respond to shareholders, et cetera? We have to look for creative solutions. So we're, involving our development finance institutions. So in the US case, that's the DFC, and our ECAs. So in the US case, our export credit agency is EXIM. So working with those agencies and others to provide targeted public sector finance support. It's not meant to replace private sector finance, but it's meant to reduce the risk in certain areas so that we can diversify these supply chains. The only other thing I'd mention here is that every critical mineral, in a sense, is a unique market. They're very different markets. So in certain of the critical minerals where, for example, China has put export controls on the US, gallium, germanium, graphite, rare earths, those tend to be lower volume markets that are not, you don't have exchanges that trade those markets. A relatively small amount of money can go a long way. And then you have other markets, and particularly minerals where Indonesia has quite a bit, copper and nickel, for example, where investments are multi-billion-dollar investments that take many, many years to see through. And so I just flag that for your audience to think of each mineral as a unique market that requires different solutions, probably, to help diversify and make those markets more resilient. So I could go on, but I think we'd probably want to save time for discussion, so I'll stop there. Back to you, Bu Edi.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pak Reggie, for very brief but comprehensive explanation, so we know like your view on the other countries' market dominance, for example, and also how to minimize the supply chain risk. Thank you very much for your sharing. Okay, and we turning to the last but not least speaker. I would like to invite Mas Dandi Rafitrandi, researcher at the Economic Department of CSIS Indonesia, to provide insight on the economic opportunity and policy consideration, especially for Indonesia-US collaboration in the critical mineral sector. Mas Dandi, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Ibu Edi, for the kind introduction. Good evening, good morning for all the panelists and also all participants here in Jakarta and the US and all over the world. Thank you so much. This is such a great opportunity for us as CSIS, and also our one of our program, which is the Decarbonization for Development Lab, which also supported as a co-host of this webinar. So I think I have two parts in my opening remarks. I think first, I would like to introduce you to also our report, which has been released by DFD Lab last year, talking about the critical minerals governance. And surprisingly, I saw quite a lot of alignment with Professor McFarland and Georgetown University's report as well. So I think it's very great to have the same understanding on how the critical minerals importance in this in today's geopolitics and also geoeconomics turbulence, if I can say. and also the transition energy transition minerals, that is also very important. So the first thing, I think both reports echoing the need of a more strategic and coordinated frameworks. For example, the Georgetown University underscores the need for the US and its allies to refine and centralize critical minerals methodology, and also improve the modeling capabilities across trusted partners. While in Indonesia's perspective, our report shows that we need to have a more strategic strategy in terms of critical minerals, because it's not only talking about added value, but also our position in global value chain considerations. And beyond that, for example, as Pa Edi already mentioned about the sustainability and also the security of the supply chain. So we need to have more strategic strategy on the critical minerals. I think in other words, our report highlights that the policy applied to certain critical minerals might not provide the same long-term maximum benefit if applied to other critical minerals. So it depends on the critical minerals. I think Professor McFarland also highlight this in his remarks. So this will depend on Indonesia's production position, relative reserves, sustainability practices compared to other mineral producing countries. And the second, I think, alignment that I found was that the report from Georgetown also seek for aligning more national policies in terms of permitting, financing, and long-term investment. And also our report also identifies some internal challenges, such as overlapping authorities among ministries and regional bodies as a barrier to policy coherence. I think this is also very important. The next one is actually the report from Georgetown University stressed that the importance of consistent economic diplomacy, which is needed to build a durable partnership, particularly with developing countries, and also winning in terms of with the competing powers in the world. And also our report, CSIS reports, highlights the urgency of diversifying investment partners to maintain competitiveness and secure sustainable market access, especially in this geopolitical fragmentation. This is not only important, but also very strategic in a way that the need to diversify actually requires the resolution of overlapping authorities between various ministries and institutions, central and also regional government in Indonesia, as well as between the government and also non-government actors. So I think Indonesia's pursuit in diversification requires capability and also commitment to enforce higher ESG standards, for example, so we can live up to a more value added in terms of our value chain. I think my last point will be both reports actually highlights the importance of environmental and social governance standards, or ESG standards. And Pa Edi also mentioned about skills and capacity in terms of knowledge exchange and critical mineral sectors. I think our report emphasizes how Indonesia should enforce more higher standards in terms of ESG, noting that external pressure, through global initiatives, also our climate commitment can drive domestic firms towards better practices. So we also highlight the importance of capacity building in terms of strengthening our institutions, governance, and technical capabilities. So there's always a skill gap there that we can improve in the future. So I think the next part of our discussion is that how do we envision the mutually beneficial cooperation between Indonesia and the United States? Of course, I cannot answer this. Maybe Pa Edi and Reggie is the are the better person to answer this. But I think for Indonesia, it's pretty straightforward because we have the largest reserves for some of the critical minerals, nickel and copper. But for the United States, I think the issue right now is how to secure supply chain resilience because this has become national priority and agenda. Just give you some examples. According to Global Trade Alert data, it's a database that actually tracks countries' export and import restrictions on critical minerals. There are around 400 state interventions between 2021 to 2024. So it's very large number. And in 2025, we're only in August, it's already 200 interventions. So in 2025, we are actually in the year of state interventions in terms of critical minerals. So I think against this backdrop, a more deliberate US and Indonesia framework should deliver a mutual benefits. US gain access to secure and responsibly sourced materials, while Indonesia can attract high quality investment, technology, and market opportunities, especially for its downstream industries. Of course, there is the challenges in terms of policy fragmentation, both globally in Indonesia and also the US. Geopolitical competition with China obviously have a strong presence in Indonesia's mineral sectors. This might complicate our engagement, but I think there is a room for Indonesia and also the US to cooperate in terms of critical minerals and industrial development. So I'm just gonna stop there and looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dandy, for observing two reports, very interesting and have the same alignment as well. And also in terms of strategy, a lot of strategy that we can adopt it. So maybe echoing then the question, it is also my question about the opportunity for US-Indonesia mineral cooperation and opportunity for Indonesia especially and US business and customer. So, based on the tonight sharing, maybe Pak Edi first, can you share about what kind of opportunity for Indonesia that we can maybe have a lot of benefit?
Yes, thank you. So I think if we understand critical minerals when we use it for a specific product, they will not independently based on the elements. They like if we want to produce batteries, for example, I think it's not only use the nickel, but we also need another elements of the critical mineral like mangan, cobalt, and others. So that's why I think we need to have a comprehensive design when we try to use the critical mineral as a part of the product. So we have to think about what the next product that we have to produce based on the critical mineral. So it's back to the questions about the cooperation with the US. As I also recall, in the 1967, we already have US companies. They finally also emerged to be the one of the largest copper producer in the world with the multi-billions revenue in this case. So that's why I think cooperation on critical minerals between Indonesia and the United States has always been a strategic priority, particularly in the context of the clean energy transition, supply chain security, and the global push for the decarbonization. If I also just recall last year's, for example, Indonesia and the US within the platform, the Indo-Pacific Economic Frameworks, are engaging in the dialogue on critical minerals to strengthen the supply chains, resilience, to promote the high standards and foster collaboration across the partners. And this platform provides an avenue to deepen Indonesia-US cooperation while promote regional competitiveness, because inside of the ASEAN, for example, not only Indonesia, but other ASEAN member states also have abundance of the critical minerals. So then we focus on mineral resources mapping, trade promotion, mineral recovery and recycling, and the most important thing is how to manage the labor and environmental protection. And Indonesia has also proposed critical mineral agreement with the US in 2024. This agreement aims to enable Indonesia critical minerals to qualify for the US electric vehicle tax credit under the Inflation Reduction Act. The key of the objective is to diversify critical minerals supply chains and promote the adoption of electric vehicle batteries technology by formalizing the shared commitment of the two countries to facilitate trade and investment, and also promote fair competition and market-oriented condition for trade and critical mineral. And as a part of the tariff negotiation with the US now, Indonesia proposed following cooperation on critical minerals. Indonesia commits to export processed critical mineral such as nickel, cobalt, and copper as requested by the US without any export control, tariff, and quota. But we under stress. We emphasize the processed. Why? Because we understand in getting the critical minerals, sometimes the element is very small. For example, in the nickels, the percentage of the used nickels maybe in the lands is just 1.20 until 1.6%. So mean 1 ton of land is only give 12 kilos or 16 kilos of the nickel. So mean if we just export the lands, it's the same that we have to export our islands to other countries to get a very small piece of metal. So that's why we have to implement the advanced technology, how to optimize the extractive technology in the mining so we can keep the environmental security in one side, but we also improve the skill of the human development in the other side, but we also get the benefit more and more and the added value for the critical mineral itself. So in the returns, Indonesia also asks the US to charge 0% tariff for those processed critical minerals that US do not produce domestically, such as nickel and cobalt. So as a copper, we request US to charge lower sectoral tariff, adjusting any US company ownership. So this is the fact that Indonesia and the US cooperation is already implemented, but how then we have to maintain the cooperations for the futures.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Edi. Thank you for comprehensive answer. So maybe the same question to Professor McFarland for the opportunity to for Indonesia and US. Given the current situation, the current development of trade deal or tariff negotiation.
Well, I have to say, I mean, after listening to this discussion so far, I'm very optimistic about the likelihood of the U.S. and Indonesia working together, because I see a lot of alignment on a number of issues here, whether from what Dandy said, from what Reggie said, from what Edie said. And just a couple points to highlight that the fact that Indonesia and the US are sort of looking at the same things and are after the same end goals here. And I think I mentioned that our report had a number of recommendations, and Dandy mentioned some of these. And one of those was that the need for a comprehensive strategy. And this is something that Edie mentioned as well, that Indonesia is looking to do more of on a comprehensive strategy, and figuring out better methodologies, which is one of the things we highlighted in there. And that speaks to one of the things Reggie mentioned about the issue of each mineral is different and has a unique market to it. And I think refining our methodologies and how we categorize these things and their end purposes, I think matters. And that all fits into a comprehensive strategy. I think the issues that Edie mentioned too about employment and optimizing mining technology and actually technology throughout the whole value cycle of critical minerals is really important. And this is something we mentioned in our report. And I think one of the benefits of working with the United States is that technology transfer, and the benefits to the country that the United States is working with. I think that's an important aspect to keep in mind here, which makes partnerships between countries like Indonesia and the US very beneficial for both. but also the employment issue and the skills development. That's not just something that Indonesia has to grow, but also in the United States, there has to be a refocus after decades of not focusing on mining and thinking of mining as and the skill of mining as something that you do for coal and sort of having uh, a negative connotation with it. I think we need to shift that and do more to create the skills for the workforce in mining, both domestically, but then abroad as well. And I think that aligns with what Indonesia is trying to do as well. And I think another thing we need to keep in mind when we're thinking about technology and things, and Edie just mentioned the critical minerals mapping and recycling of critical minerals and batteries and stuff. This is things we have to keep in mind as well as the technological innovation that is going on with critical minerals and the entire process throughout critical minerals. And it, which is a good thing because it offers up potential new technologies, potential better ways to mine and things like that. But it's also speaks to one of the biggest issues with critical minerals and expanding our supply of these. And that is something that Reggie mentioned, which is the price volatility. And when we have the unknown factor out there for potential new technologies, for the potential to increase recycling capabilities and things like this, it affects that price volatility because of how it affects future planning for mines and things like that, especially when you have mines that are on such long lead times because of permitting and things like this and streamlining of the process that needs to happen that I think we all agree on, but doing so in ways that still adhere to ESG standards and things like that. But I think, and Reggie can probably speak to this more than I can at this point, but I think in the US side of things, I think the recent government help in sort of some of the funding to these things can go a long way to sort of um, make companies a little less fearful of price volatility and things like that to demonstrate that there is a market for these things moving forward, regardless of the price and volatility and things like that. So, but I'm optimistic, and I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you, Professor McFarland. Maybe Reggie, do you want to add?
Yeah, thank you, Boo. I'll just add a few points. So, Pa Eddie mentioned U.S. investment, particularly Freeport, since 1967. I would note that when I served in Indonesia at the U.S. Embassy from 2018 to 2021, I was able to talk to and was exposed to a lot of U.S. companies across many sectors operating in Indonesia. And what I saw across the board was localization of those operations from, in Freeport's case, highly skilled mining technicians at the mine face, so to speak, all the way back to Jakarta to the head office, and in a number of sectors, as I noted, including outside of mining, in manufacturing. You saw a lot of Indonesians, including, in many cases, the country CEO of these operations was Indonesian. So all that is to say that when the U.S. invests in our partners, well, we tend to create value. It's not the case that we're coming to extract minerals or resources and then take them home. There is a recognition that we have to be good corporate citizens and invest for the long term. And I think that has served U.S. companies well. I would note, we're in discussions with several countries in Africa in the minerals space. And over the past decade or so, they've become very reliant on China. China's invested a lot in the upstream sector in Africa. And I think they've realized they need to diversify as well. They haven't seen as much value as they expected. US and certain Western companies have a better reputation in terms of hiring locally, not importing workers, striving to higher environmental and labor standards, investing in midstream processing. So I think that's the value proposition that the U.S. Brings to the table. I would note that in some ways, we face some of the same issues and constraints that Indonesia does. We have lost a lot of industries because of Chinese overcapacity over the decade or so. They've just been overproducing because of state-led policies, and that's causing a lot of difficulty. So it is very much the case that the Trump administration wants to onshore and reindustrialize, and in some cases that will be there'll be more midstream processing in the U.S. There'll be more mining in the U.S. But that said, we're not going to be able to do everything in the United States. We're going to need to work with partners like Indonesia and make sure that the value creation that takes place at every stage, from upstream to midstream to downstream, is shared, that we have value add at home in the US, but we are also value sharing with partners like Indonesia. And it may look different in each particular case, in each project, in each deal, but it's very much the case that the United States seeks to invest in our partners and build skills, capacity in our partners.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Reggie. Very interesting, but the time is very limited. Actually, we already we received some question from the chat box and from the YouTube as well. So maybe we enter to the last session about the Q&A session. I will choose maybe one question, but for the speakers, it is open for you if you want to answer live or in the chat box as well, because we have limited time. And also, I expect that you not only answer the question, but also deliver the closing remarks at the same time. So maybe I choose a question from Freddie Melanson. As the panelists have discussed, Indonesia has been a global leader in leveraging resource policy for industrial and human development. What lessons do you think other emerging countries could learn from Indonesia approach to critical minerals? Maybe I let to Pak Edi and then the other speakers. Yeah.
All right. So the lesson that we can get is depend on the industrial policies and also the next industrial production using the critical mineral we have. Suppose it only depends on the critical mineral as a primary commodities, maybe we can less the benefit from that because it's a very low level of the economic value. But if we can, of course, bring the industrial technology together with the critical minerals processes, so that we can get the lesson learned from this. With the US, for example, as our colleagues mentioned, with the Freeport, we advance our mining technology, we extract more optimized. So it's also give a lot of benefits, not only in terms of how to secure the environments, but also how to improve the capacity of the people who work on the mining process. And also in the next step, in the smelter process, we can also do more efficient to have the next industries, which is batteries or others industrials. So for the copper, for example, it's not only for the industries for, say, like in the cable, but the micro cables, the very micro cable is very important because now the devices use the micro and nano technology size. So that's why I think we can improve the technology on the critical mineral depends on the next critical industry we bring together with the critical minerals.
All right. Thank you, Pak Edi, for very brief answer. Reggie, do you want to add?
Yeah, I would highlight the value probably of premium markets to some extent. To the extent we can differentiate a high standard market where you have environmental and labor standards and get the OEMs, the end users, to perhaps pay a premium, that can be part of the value proposition. definitely recognize that Indonesia will be making its own sovereign decisions on policies to encourage inward investment and value add and processing in country. But would just note that while it does that, it helps to have, clear and stable rules and the proper incentives in place to attract capital from non-state-owned enterprises from the private sector. And that will bring in technology transfer and high standards and
Kasihan
development
sakit.
of human capital.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Maybe
Kang Susanul.
I give the screen to Professor Karim Farlan to answer the question. Also, maybe you can highlight about the current geopolitical issues.
Yeah, so I mean, I think as far as the what we can learn from Indonesia, I think others are better placed to answer that than I have been. But I think again, I just for final comments, I think this is going to be an ongoing important issue for the United States, as I mentioned in my opening comments, and others have mentioned. Just the need and the vision that this is something that we need to find stable and secure access to, driven in large part by COVID-19 and supply chain disruptions, I think, and coupled with the geopolitical competition with China, as we've seen across administrations in the U.S. And I'd like to highlight that, this is something that the first Trump administration began to push more heavily than the Biden administration picked up where they left off, so to speak, in driving the importance of critical minerals. And that has just continued into the second Trump administration. So, this is something that I think is a bipartisan issue in the United States and is going to continue moving forward. And that in large part is driven by the geopolitical competition between the US and China and a desire for these stable access to raw materials. But at the end of the day, just in sort of closing, I'd just like to highlight again that, having this discussion, I'm optimistic because of the overlap in a lot of the areas in a lot of the ways that Indonesia views this, the United States views this, and recommendations that we had in our report that CSIS Indonesia had in their report, and where we see the need for growth in these things, the need for better strategies, continuing technological innovation, skill development, technology transfer, and all these things. These align between the US and Indonesia. So I see a lot of room for growth moving forward.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor McFarland. And last, to Dandi, maybe you can also answer the same question and about your observation related to future trajectory of US-Indonesia critical minerals. Any opinions or view about that?
All right. Thank you, Widi. I think for my closing remarks, I just want to highlight that Indonesia's efforts to diversify its supply chain. I think this is also this should be one of the key highlights of Indonesia's policy, especially in the critical minerals. For example, we just had several free trade agreements with, for example, Chile and Australia. I think it also covers critical minerals provision there. And as we all know that Chile and Australia are actually a producer of lithium, and nickel and lithium are very important piece in terms of EV and also energy transition technologies. So I think we are very eager to diversifying our supply chain. And also I think the Indonesia EU, which hopefully it will be soon it will be concluded, also includes one of the critical mineral professions. So I think in terms of Indonesia and the US, maybe not a free trade agreement, but I think some sort of dialogue or some informal settings of how can we actually can discuss several opportunities will be very, very beneficial. And I think adding from Pak Edi points regarding our tariff negotiation, as you can see from the joint statement between Indonesia and the US, the critical minerals are actually one of the key highlights of the joint statements. That's Edi mentioned about the axis of the critical minerals, but also regarding how Indonesia and the US can actually have a steel and critical minerals provision, labor and environmental standards, and also how they can actually cooperate in terms of combating unfair trade practices from other countries. So it actually lays quite some of opportunities for Indonesia and the US to further work in these sectors. Yeah, thank you, Kawidi.
Thank you very much, Dendi. Because the time is already up, so I'm really sorry if some question cannot be answered in this webinar. I think everyone still a lot of question related to the geopolitical tension, for example, the current tariff negotiation and others. So I hope this is not the end of the collaboration, but it is like the initial one, and we can have more session about specific discussion on a lot of topics related to this. So we enter to the last session one. I will close this webinar. Thank you very much to Professor McFarland, to Reggie Singh, to Pak Edi Pambudi, and Dendi Rafitrandi for sharing very valuable insight and also strategy and the books as well, the reports. I hope everyone can read after this. And thank you for the participant for joining us from different time zone across the world. And today's discussion, we has underscored the strategic importance of critical mineral, but from Indonesia and the US as the driver of development, industrial policy, economic security, and technological innovation. We hope our conversations spark further dialogues and practical cooperation between both Indonesia and the US, as well as with the broader global community. On behalf of the FD Lab at CSIS Indonesia and the Institute for Study of Diplomacy at Georgetown University, I would like to thank you once again for being asked for this last 1 hour, and we look forward to continuing the conversation in the future forum. And I close this webinar. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Well, thank you, thank you. So, Pak Regi, let's meet together when I am in Washington DC.
Yes, please. Will be nice to see you, Pa Edi.
Nice to see you, Pak Regi.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Kelly.
Yep,
Thank
thanks.
you, Professor.
Have a good night.
Have a good
Reggie,
morning.
have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Yep.